When learning web development, you might have a hard time making your websites look good on tablet and mobile. So when you started 3D web development, maybe you became anxious just to think about it. But at the end of this video, this time will be behind you, as we will learn 6 techniques to make any 3D website responsive. This is the starter pack we'll be working with. We have that home section with the restaurant in 3D in the background, the title on the top. We can scroll, we have another section with some text and information on the left and a 3D model on the right representing the chef. Then below we have the menu with a 3D slider, so you can slide between different 3D models. And this is it. It is only 3 sections. Before having a look at the different issues we have with this website in mobile and tablet, let's see what assets I've been using to create this starter pack. They are all coming from Quaternius. Some are from the Pirate Kit, most of them. And for some dishes, they are from the Sushi Restaurant Kit. Link will be in the description, such as the link to get the starter pack. Let's have a look at the results we have using it on mobile. So we have the restaurant, it's visible, it's okay-ish, but we can see all the restaurants. So if we have information we want to display, it's truncated. But it's not the worst case. Still, we can make it better. Let's switch to the second section for the chef. The HTML, I made it somehow responsive, but for the 3D model, it's hiding a bit the text and it's a bit truncated. Even if the result isn't very ugly, still we can improve it and make it look better on mobile. Then we have the menu with the 3D slider. And it looks okay on mobile. The issue here is mainly on desktop because we don't want to see all the dishes and have a different effect on desktop and mobile. Let's start making it responsive. We'll start with this first section. My first technique is to use a scaling factor. So let's say I designed it with a responsive dimension of 1300 pixels. This is the perfect look I want for my section. What we will do is to create a scaling factor, so when we reduce the size, it will still look the same. And also when we get bigger, we want it to look bigger because we can have bigger screen than this one and we have too much space on the left and on the right. Let's jump in our experience file. This is where we have all our different sections. We have the restaurant, it's in groups, the chef and the menu. I made it pretty simple. We also have the UI here, is the same logic, 3 different sections. Now we want to adjust the 3D part, so it's in experience. And this is this restaurant group here. I was telling you we'll be using a scaling factor, so let's create it. Restaurant scaling factor, because we will be using one specifically for this group here. It will be equal to window.innerWidth. This is the screen at our disposal, divided by 1300, which is the perfect dimension I've been using to design this website. So when it's below 1300, we will be something below 1, for example, 0.9, 0.5, 0.1 if it's very small, etc. And if it's bigger, we'll get a scaling factor bigger than 1, so 1.1, 1.5, etc. This scaling factor, we can apply it to the whole section group using scale is equal to restaurant scaling factor, and we can console log it. What do we have doing this? We are at 1300. We have the scaling factor, which is at 1. If we reduce the size, you have the whole scene that is getting smaller, which is the results we wanted. And if we go, and if we look at the value, it is below 1. And if we look at bigger resolution, we have 1.1. Let's have a look on mobile what it looks like. iPhone 12 Pro. This looks good, but maybe it's a bit too small. We should limit how small it can get and also how big it can get. Now we have 0.3. Maybe we can say, okay, it hasn't to be below 0.5. It's okay if we truncate a bit, but we still want to be able to distinguish the different buildings. To do this, we will simply use math.maximum between this value. So when it's too small, it will take the minimum value we want, which is here 0.5. So if it's below 0.5, it will take the maximum value. which will be 0.5 between the two. And when it's bigger, it will be using that value. Now you can see because we reached the threshold, we are at 0.5. If we switch back to responsive, it's still getting slower and slower until a certain threshold and that it won't go below. Let's say we want to apply the same for bigger resolution. We don't want to go above 1.1 maybe. So it's not getting bigger. Even if in our case, it's not a big deal. We will just do the opposite. So math.min, that value, and let's say 1.2. What it means is if that value is over 1.2, because we take the minimum value, it will take 1.2. So we can't go above that value. Now what you can see is when we resize, automatically it re-render our component and our scaling factor. But this is not a normal behavior of React 3 Fiber. It is doing it because in our component, we are using use3 and the viewport size. So if we get rid of it, and let's say const viewport is equal to width will be 5, it's just a random value. Now, if we resize our component, it won't update and re-render our component. So we should add event listener and store our scaling factor maybe in a state to be sure we have a re-render of the component. But because we need the viewport for the rest of the experience and it's simplifying the process for us, we will still do it. Our first section looks fine. Let's jump to the second one. So here it was designed for the same perfect resolution. And let's say on bigger device, we want to adjust its position too. This time it will be const chef position factor is equal to window.inner width divided by 1300. We can go below, find where it's positioned. So cook position X, so it's this one we want to impact. We can multiply it by the position factor. What it does is it's adjusting the position of the chef. When we move it, it will place it correctly. But the issue here is when we reduce the size, we just don't have a good place to put our chef. So sometimes you don't want to have the same exact experience using mobile and desktop resolution. What we will try to do is to display the 3D model here in this white space and display the text below here. My technique to do this is to create a variable named isMobile, and we will check the resolution of our window. So again, window.innerWidth. And here it's asking me below 768. But we are using Tailwind and I don't know the breakpoint value. What I can do is go to the UI. Let's say I adding randomly max width, screen, and I get the different breakpoints. So small is 640 pixels, MD is 768 pixels. So was it that value that was proposing by Copilot? Yes, it is. So we can use that same value for our breakpoint. It's good, especially if you want to modify the UI to have the same breakpoint between the HTML and the 3D scene. Here we can say it's the breakpoint for mobile device. It's MD on Tailwind. We have our isMobile variable. Maybe you could separate it in a hook, but here we want to keep it simple. We have it in our main file, isMobile. We go below to the chef. And here, the position X will be that only if we are not on mobile. If we are on mobile, we want to center it, so it will be 0. Otherwise, it will be our logic here. What do we get by doing this? Is we have the chef centered when it's below and when it's getting bigger, it's at the correct position. But below, we want it to be at the center position, but we want it to be over that section here. Like we did for the X position, we can render conditionally this one. So isMobile, it will be 0 or minus 0.5, but it was just a slight adjustment. What is putting our chef at the same position is the viewport height. So here for the whole group, we need to adjust it. So isMobile, we will say minus viewport.height divided by 2. If not, viewport height. And here is what we have. So based on the viewport height, it will adjust the position, but still we need to make some adjustment because there is too much space between them. So maybe the minus 0.5 was good, but we can maybe put more. And here is what we have. We have the 3D model here on top of our text section, and it's way better than what we had before on mobile, even if it was visibly accurate and we could see everything. Now let's jump to the last section. What we have is we have our menu here, and we can switch between different type of food, but the spacing isn't related to the size of the screen, which results on not having the exact same experience on both formats. At the moment, I think on mobile it looks quite convincing, but when we switch back to desktop, it's not so good looking. What we can use to space our items is to use the viewport width. That way we are sure they will be out of the screen and the viewport width value will follow the screen size. I think it's a good time to talk about what is the viewport width. So let's say we have a 3D scene. It's multiple objects. I know you like how I draw, it's very beautiful. So we have 3D objects, a sphere, a cube. Sorry for the quality of my drawings. They are in a 3D space. And what makes them available on our screen is because we see them through the scope of a camera. It has a field of view and it's viewing the 3D scene. And then it's rendered on our screen. And our viewport width and height are the dimension in 3D space that the camera is able to see from that 3D scene. So when we reduce the size of our screen, let's say we are on mobile, we don't change the camera settings. And this is only that part that we will see. So the viewport width will be smaller and the viewport height will be smaller. So we have different options, adjusting the content in the 3D scene or even adjusting the settings of our camera. But this drawing is starting to look ugly. We can start coding. Let's look at our food items. So it's an array of food items with a different model, the name and description. And our experience, it's looping through all of them to display a food item, which is here. It's loading the 3D model. And the position x is equal to the index at the very starting moment. But then we have a use frame, which is animating its position based on the distance of the current index of the item in the array, and the food index, which is at what current position our slider is. We get it from the menu here. We have the UI, and when we change using the arrows or the dots below, the food index is changing here. It's what we are displaying on screen, and it will automatically trigger a change in the distance, and it will adjust the position by sliding to it using a lure. Currently, we are using food spacing to space elements. It's equal to 2.5, so it's an arbitrary value. That's why here on a somehow tablet value, we can see other items, but on mobile, we can see only one item, which for me looks the best. And also on desktop, we can see everything. This is not perfect. Like we have below, we can use the viewport, get it inside each food item, and multiply that x value by the viewport.width. By doing this, I don't think we need the food spacing. Now, when we look at our slider, we can see only one item on desktop. Here it is. And on mobile, we have the same logic here, which is better. But if you are a perfectionist, you can notice that here, the items are going a bit on this way, not just on the left and right, but they are going far away in the backward. And this is because on our application, the position of the camera is at 5. And when you do this, it's not very easy. Let me explain to you why. Let's go back to your favorite drawing place. So we have the X, Z, and the Y value. If we are in front, so our camera is in front of it, if we adjust the X value to positionate our item using the viewport width, it will be okay. So let's say like this. It will go from there to there. But if we change the X position of the camera, our camera will be here and look like this. So when we adjust the exposition of our 3D items in the scene, it will be way complicated to adjust them like this. We will have to do complex calculation because it's not just adjusting with the x-axis, but we should both adjust the x and z value to positionate our items in front of the camera. For those cases, sometimes it's better not to set the x position on the camera and define it to 0. By doing this, the items are perfectly aligned here, but we lose some details we had. We had the chef looking slightly on the side, and the restaurant was also turned a little bit. So instead of adjusting the x position on the camera, simply you can go to your whole group here and change the rotation. Let's say deg to rad and -30. We still have the rotation on the restaurant. It looks exactly the same, but it's way easier to know where our camera is. It's in front. So it's easier to adjust the rest of the parameters and the rest of the sections. Let's still do one adjustment on the chef if we want to rotate it. And here, because we are not playing with the camera, we can decide to rotate it in another direction. So deg to rad, let's say 15 degrees. So it's the opposite direction than the restaurant. Now it's slightly looking to the right and the restaurant to the left. We can go a bit beyond for the chef. If we look here on those resolutions between maybe 1000 to our breakpoint that we defined, it's not perfect. So let's go back to the UI. What was it? Max W screen. And maybe we'll be using the large breakpoint instead of the MD. So it's 1024. We get rid of it. It's just to see the value from Visual Studio Code. Experience is mobile. Where are you? Here. So 1024. And it's LG on Tailwind. So now if we resize, it's scaling before 700 and it's looking always good. I think we are good for those examples, but let me show you two other techniques you could use for other projects. A very simple one is, instead of using a scaling factor like we did, in your camera, you would change the field of view so you will be able to see more. So you can, for example, increase the field of view on mobile, and it's the same than reducing the scaling of your whole scene. So it's up to you and the best result you have. When you have more complex item, my last recommendation is to use camera controls. It has useful methods that will ensure that your items are visible on the screen. It will do the calculation for you. Let's open the fit to bounding sphere example. What we have is this 3D scene with a dark model, and that sphere that is representing what we will always be able to see when we click on fit. So if we click fit, if we rotate anyway, we always see the whole sphere. So if we resize it, we need to reload. We hit fit, and the dimensions are adjusted, and we always are able to see everything. So it can be useful if you want to display a model and you want even to let the user rotate around it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and will become the king of building responsive 3D websites. If you want to continue learning, you can check my project-based course, React 3 Fiber, the ultimate guide to 3D web development. I recently added 6 new lessons. The link is in the description below. But I also do free content like this video you are watching right now, so don't forget to subscribe and watch my other tutorials like this one here.